This is the third webinar in the series. I know that most of you have attended at least one. JP, I'm not sure about you. I think you may be, I think you're a virgin amongst this group today. But great to have you here. We're joined by Jules. Julian is one of the co-founders at RevGeni and looks after product and operations. He has run one of the previous webinars, which was about demystifying AI. Probably here's the list, if you like. So I ran the first one, which was about identifying opportunities for your business, and so I think you were part of that one with the Leica network. Jules has run a webinar on demystifying AI in practice, and today is about deciding on, now that you hopefully have an idea as to where you might want to focus, do you build or buy, or do you, what are the practical ways forward and the considerations around how you actually get going. So that's the focus for today. At the end of my webinar, and I know, Andy, I think you've seen the recording, we asked attendees to just think and take away a kind of a mapping kind of canvas, if you like, and Julian did something similar in his webinar. So the idea was to think about current processes across the core functions in your business. And admittedly, in small founder-led businesses, you probably don't have an HR function, but you will potentially be doing HR things like potentially hiring people and so on. So looking at each function, looking at the processes within those functions that are frustrating you, that are clearly not working as well as they should, taking too much time, manual, however you define it. The second step was then to look at, well, in terms of AI capabilities, well, let's say automation or analyzing data or helping you to make better decisions, etc. How do those fit? The third step was then, if we look at each of these processes, where is the opportunity for the business in terms of time saving or better quality or better speed, or just the actual opportunity cost of living with an underperforming process in terms of your time and frustration. The fourth step was then some kind of prioritization process. And then fifthly, do you have a sense of, is it a quick win, something you can get done quite quickly, or does this feel like something that may require budget, a project, etc.? So that's really, we're going to move forward from that. And if any of you attending today feel like you haven't kind of got this far yet, no problem at all. You'll be able to view the video online. Take some time to think about your own business in this fairly structured way, and then work with what we're going to cover off today. Okay, so in terms of the overall content for today, we're going to look at building. What are the pros and cons of that? When should you do it? What are the risks? A hybrid approach where you're finding you're not actually recruiting someone or using someone in your team to build, you're actually finding an expert, and there are many of them out there to build something for you. The pros and cons of that. And then contrasting that with buying, subscribing as you might do for a number of tools already, and the pros and cons of that. And then just a quick decision matrix. And then I think, I'm not sure that the content will take all of the time. Let's finish up, I think, with some discussion around what are you thinking about your businesses? Let's talk about any opportunities for improvement using AI that you might be thinking about, and let's talk practically around how you might then look at the build, buy, or a hybrid approach. So, Jules, I think this is for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Morning. As Grant mentioned, I'm Jules Musson. I joined Grant and RevGeni middle of last year, and my background is software in various guises over a number of years. I worked a lot actually in human resource software, both in consulting, implementation, and more recently in product management. So in joining RevGeni, worked on product, also on operations with our customers, understanding the requirements of businesses that are scaling, and looking at this fascinating intersection of how you grow and how we can leverage AI to achieve that. So this slide is a bit of a recap. I ran a longer webinar on some of these themes, but we thought it was useful context just as we go into the kind of build, buy, hybrid type decision process. And I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the generalist AI chat, so the box on the left-hand side here. So we're talking often here about ChatGPT, but there's also Claude, there's also Gemini, Copilot, etc. And this is, so prevalent at the moment that we're used to it as a tool. So in other words, you ask a question, typically the AI chat provides an answer, then you continue, but it's very much we're in charge of the overall process, and we're kind of picking up the tool to do a certain job as part of the bigger job and then putting the tool back down again. We're kind of very conscious at RevGeni there's a category of AI becoming much more prevalent right now, which is purpose-built for business use. And these are specialized solutions that can execute autonomously. So AI agents can complete jobs on their own, as it were, under your supervision. And we very much support, what we call human in the loop, and making sure that you approve what's happening with the AI. It's a very powerful tool. But AI agents are particularly good at taking on entire processes, particularly ones that are repetitive. And so therefore it's an exciting phase in the evolution of AI. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's changing almost daily at the moment. So it's quite a job just to keep up with what's happening. Now, it's not purely just kind of two different types of AI is something I wanted to say as well, because when we get into whether you should build your own AI, whether you should kind of buy it off the shelf, what the different options are, I think it's important to say that the left-hand side of this picture, particularly with things like custom GPTs, which are effectively self-built, are evolving towards something which is specialist, like the agents, which have been built, for a particular job to be executed. However, I think there's still some differentiation. There's kind of a growing area in between the two, where it's important to understand that AI agents have often been built almost as a team worker, like a digital colleague that you can delegate to, and therefore works as part of a team. So there's the concept of sharing, collaboration, and consistency with an AI agent that you necessarily get with the kind of one-off interaction with an AI chat. So the theme here really is that we're moving from more passive AI tools with the chat towards more active or proactive AI co-workers with the agents. And I just wanted to say, I said this on my webinar as well, don't worry, there is absolutely no idea here around replacing anyone. Actually, quite the opposite. We believe quite firmly that the opportunity is that AI can take away the unwanted workload of us. And in fact, in any case, a lot of the skills that businesses are looking for in any case is that, the critical thinking, the emotional intelligence, the real innovation, which obviously humans are still much better at than AI. But, the fact is that AI can process a lot of data and do certain jobs really, really well. There's no point in competing with that. Let's embrace it. So Grant, on the next slide, yep. I suppose the first question over on the left-hand side, I was thinking, what's the biggest, problem or challenge that you face in your company at this time? And there'll be lots, but one thing that I'm sure we can all relate to is simply lack of time. So it's very common in scaling businesses that we're wearing multiple hats. Absolutely the case too. If you're the founder or owner of the business, you're probably doing lots of different things simultaneously. And it's also, you know, according to some analysis, common that a large proportion, in some cases over half of what you're doing, is spent on routine tasks. And so therefore, you know, and obviously you'd prefer to be focused on your business and thinking about the strategies and so on, but you're just spending all that time on the admin. And this does seem to be coming through as a common piece of feedback, that we're spread thinly. You know, the same at RevGeni, you know, we're kind of also experiencing that as a small business. You know, there's a lot to do. It's a lot about deciding what not to do as well as what to prioritize. So we're spread thinly. There's typically, you know, just simply lack of headcount budget to expand in that way. So AI is an obvious go-to, but how to leverage that. So you don't need to be kind of technical experts, you know, understand machine learning, all of those things, really. It's more about getting our heads around a common problem, which is return on investment, I suppose. So how do we best identify a process? And the good thing is it could be something you don't really enjoy doing, and get that process over to AI, so we can take advantage of what this powerful technology can do. So we need to find out the thing early on, what's suitable for optimization. So as Grant mentioned, very, very simple, you know, 3 questions. Question 1, is this process or task causing a bottleneck? So if there's a blockage, if it's something you do dozens of times, it's draining your energy, then yes, there are concrete pain points and hours that you can measure, that you can save. You know, if it's a one-off thing you do once a year, then yeah, it's probably not a candidate. Question 2, is there a pattern? So is this something that's reasonably repeatable? Are there some kind of steps involved that we can write down? And if so, then AI, especially AI agents who execute tirelessly, are good candidates for that. So yes, let's get the processes clear, because AI amplifies what you're doing. So you know, you want to make sure that we know what we're giving to the AI to automate. But if we can articulate the logic, then basically this question around pattern is a yes. If it's something around pure one-off gut feeling, then probably a no. And then question 3, is there good data, especially examples of success? So have we got instances where this was done well? For example, you know, marketing emails that are converted, so we've got a proof point and a template to use, or some other kind of tested process. That would be a yes. If it's something brand new, we've never done it before, it's probably a no. So ultimately, we can amplify the impact by removing constraints that previously limited what you could get done, and AI loves this. Key differentiator about this is that the AI can now access, you know, your computers and your systems, so that makes it far more powerful. And it is a leap of faith, because you know, we need to kind of trust what's going on. But I think going through what we're going to talk about today, you'll get an idea of how we can calculate the return on investment, so measure what we're doing before and after. And I think even if things are evolving fast, the bigger risk is to do absolutely nothing with AI, because clearly your competitors will be doing something, and therefore it's important to just get started, and we can learn and iterate from there. So today is going to be a little bit about how to best get started, and I think with that we can move over to our first slide around the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of build as opposed to buying off the shelf. So when we talk about build, first thing to say really is that, you know, it's more likely to be an option for a larger, already scaled business, but it doesn't mean that it's not something to consider. Reason that we say that about the larger scale businesses is because clearly if there is an IT team in place with tech knowledge and maybe a project management office to handle the project plan and what we're trying to achieve with this implementation of AI technology, then there's already a structure that we can kind of slot into. And most small businesses simply don't have that at this point. You know, we're focused on just growing our business. But I think it's worth considering. So I'll run through this table. I think, you know, the first thing to probably say is that, you know, it would mean, you know, taking on staff if you don't already have people who know AI, then you're going to have to bring that knowledge in-house. Obviously, we can, we're very much kind of supporting, educating yourself and colleagues about AI. But if we're going to build the thing from scratch, then that is going to require a deeper level of technical knowledge. The advantages, though, are that you can build something that really fits exactly what you need to do. And I think it's very common to find that processes for specific organizations, are, if not unique, they've already become tailored to how you want to work. So you don't necessarily want to change that just because you're bringing in tech. So an advantage here is that you can build exactly as you want. And, that might be a reason that you go for this approach. But as you can see, there are probably more disadvantages, certainly for smaller businesses, for taking on a build project. It takes time. And these are actually, as Grant and I were discussing this, these are not necessarily different from prior technologies. They're very similar, but with AI, there's kind of additional considerations. But taking on a project which has a beginning, middle, and end is clearly going to take time and money. But there's also the additional maintenance that comes beyond the project, and the fact that you could be investing in something which you then need to kind of, your critical path may not be met, and therefore you need to kind of rework, and there's the risk of having to iterate from there as well. So no matter how well you plan any project, especially with technology, there's no guarantee that it'll get you the outcome that you want if you've built it on your own. I think a few considerations here are that at the moment there's considerations about things like compliance and data privacy, and if you can't get these from vendors when you come to the buy stage, then you might want to build yourself, so you know exactly what's going on from the inside out. So there's a potential attitude to risk that's to be taken into consideration. And there's also the kind of idea that if you're a very specific fintech firm, building something proprietary, then that's probably built on your own transactional data, so you probably would build in that case because you're not using the commercial publicly available LLMs, or a healthcare business building something around decision making that's set on a data set which comes from something that isn't available in the public domain. So I think ultimately in those cases the AI capability they're building is something that can't be replicated by something off the shelf. So that's where build might be relevant. I think what we're talking about here is more how you want to run your business and the efficiencies you can get through your current operational processes. So in that case, this approach, I guess, would make sense if you're very specific, if you do have existing in-house AI talent, and if your timeline is not critical, you don't need to go that fast. You've got time to do a project, essentially. But in summary, some of the old kind of horror stories that we've heard around AI, around traditional technology applied to AI. And, typically we would want to avoid that unless we've great data and skills in-house. So the next one is hybrid. So this is where, I suppose if I kind of run through what it means, it would be like doing the first option, a build, but with third-party help, so bringing in someone to run the project for you. And obviously the advantages of that are that expertise is brought in. You don't need to kind of worry about the skills, and you're sharing some risk with the vendor who helps you with it. The cons, the disadvantages are that you need to take time to select the right partner for that. You need to think about costs. You need to still spend time on communication, make sure it's on track. And at the end, you may have some degree of consideration of who owns the solution, who owns the IP itself. And you do need to maintain it ongoing. So there may be some kind of retainer cost if you want to keep the third party involved ongoing. But obviously it has certain reasons why there are certain reasons you might do it if you simply want to get help to achieve that. I think what's interesting here is for bigger enterprise-sized businesses, they probably are going to take this route because it feels safer in the sense of control. And actually, it's not a coincidence that all of the large system integrator firms have AI practices, the likes of Accenture, Deloitte, and so on, who may not be in scope for this conversation, but just by dint of looking at this, it's a growing area also in the kind of mid to lower market as well. So there are firms like Faculty AI who've worked with the NHS and local government. There's Contexa and Peltarium who sit in that kind of specialist space, which is a growing ecosystem of firms that help smaller businesses with AI. So it is beginning to happen, but it's fairly nascent at the moment. And then lastly, it is worth, coming back to the point earlier around custom GPTs and so on, it is worth considering that these kind of no-code, low-code AI automation agencies like Zapier, but also others like Make, they are helping all businesses construct workflows and integrations. And I think for us and founder-led businesses, that's the most relevant type of company to look at to outsource. But I think that is hybrid, because you could argue, well, actually, that's just buying it off the shelf, which I think sits in the next section we're going to talk about. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a hybrid approach, there are ways of doing it cheaply. There are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of developers around the world hanging out in AI communities that would take on a project, on a pretty cheap day rate or fixed rate. So the pricing for the hybrid projects, I think, varies quite widely. One of the concerns, though, about finding the right kind of developer, because a lot of people are sort of just getting into it, is that you've then got to think about, are they developing in something like, let's say, Lovable, which is really easy and quick to develop something that looks really nice, but it's not robust. It falls over the next week, or the architecture doesn't allow for change, or sort of complex use of data, or what have you. So, there's lots of opportunity to engage with people, and it's almost like a learning opportunity if you had a little bit of spare cash, if you wanted to go down that route, but, fraught with quite a lot of other concerns. Yeah, so the last option really is buying or subscribing to an existing solution. And all of you would have done this in some shape or other, both as individuals and I would imagine for your businesses. So you will have some experience of this. So, I mean, you do need to be clear on your needs. And actually, I think one of the perhaps pitfalls with the buying bit is that there's a sense that, I don't have to dig as deeply or to understand my needs in as much detail as I would if I were building or asking someone to build for me or for my business. But I do, try not to fall into that little hole, because, just because you're buying something that already exists, you still need to be super clear on your needs and requirements to assess the fit. There are many ways, obviously, these days of researching solutions that are a potential fit, the likes of G2, Capterra, even Trustpilot, are great ways for, slightly more mature solutions. A lot of startups won't even be rating or showing on those platforms or portals. So you then, if you're interested in a potential vendor or supplier that fits in that category, you're going to have to do more of your own research. But it's great to have that validation if you can get it. So from a pro's perspective, obviously, this is the fastest option. It might be days, but certainly no more than weeks as opposed to months. Clearly, it's cheaper overall and cash flow friendly. So in most cases, you don't have to sign up for a year. You're signing up monthly, which gives you that flexibility. And if you do choose the right vendor, you should be seeing the solution improving consistently. That would be, I think, a cause of concern if you signed up for something and you're not seeing a consistent cadence of regular improvements based on customer feedback. In terms of cons, there definitely are some. A lot of solutions that you'll come across will lack maturity. So you do need to go in with your eyes open. And frankly, I think you need to be patient. So I think often with buying, it's a question of finding a solution that meets, let's say, 80% of your requirements. And you're willing to live with the fact that the other 20% are not being addressed. And you're kind of hoping that they may be addressed at some point. But the reality is that, you might get to 85 or 90%, but in many cases, you probably won't get to 100% of your needs being met. So you do need to be flexible. Finding an exact match is, I think, quite lucky or fortunate rather than the standard. And if you do have obviously additional requirements, then they may or may not be prioritized. If other customers in the providers like this are obviously looking for the common themes that come back from their existing customers. If your requirements are common, they're likely to get prioritized. If they're not, they won't. So, yeah, this approach, I think, is the best fit for most smaller founder-led businesses when you don't yet have an internal IT team. Your requirements are fairly common, and that doesn't mean they're not important. But if we reference back to what we do, we're trying to build for common workflows that most people need support on. So common doesn't mean unimportant. Everyone's got to do them. They've got to do them well, and you need results quickly. So just a sort of final decision matrix, and then perhaps let's open the discussion to talk about what any of you are thinking in terms of where you're looking for improvement in your business, projects you might have taken and learned from possibly, or things you're thinking about doing, and hopefully we can help and add some value to that. So yeah, building your own is, from an urgency versus custom perspective, you're unlikely to get anything for 6 months. But if it's a core differentiator for your business, and you're dealing with very specific requirements, if you've got a certain amount of revenue, you've got some strong cash flow, you've got a strong technical team, you've got a slightly higher risk tolerance, build is a great fit. Outsourcing is quicker. You can find people easier. It's best suited if your needs are important, but not necessarily unique. More suitable for slightly smaller organizations. Generally, you don't have the ongoing cost to service of the staff, but you will have some ongoing maintenance costs. The risk reduces there a little. You've got more control. And then buying is more about, getting results now for standard business functions, for small teams that are fairly resource and cash constrained and lower risk. Great. So let's perhaps open it up to questions, comments, and any perhaps thoughts that any of you have around actual projects that you're thinking of, or even perhaps learnings from things you've tried so far.
I've got a question, Grant, if that's all right.
Sure, Eddie.
Hi. Yeah, I'm really interested in some of the areas that I think it would really help me more in the kind of business development side, probably more urgently than in the delivery side. That may come later. And I'm thinking things like content creation, outreach, maybe commenting perhaps on say on like a LinkedIn post or something like that. My concern around it, so I think I mentioned before, I've tried with the custom GPT. I've also tried with the Claude project, which is a bit better, but it's all right, but it's sort of it's not great. So it's not saving me masses of time, I'm finding. It probably needs a bit more context, but my concern though with which I guess a lot of people have, is when you remove yourself a bit. I recognise the point around human in the loop, but you want it to save time, and if you're using an AI tool to kind of create something that is sounding like you, but isn't necessarily you, particularly if it's like in messaging as well, rather than, you know, that it's, you sort of go through layers that, you know, there's social media content maybe, and then if it's actually communicating with people as you, and, you know, that I just worry about the, you know, authenticity of it and the trust, and kind of where that right balance is between saving the time, and because at the moment it's taking me ages to do a lot of this stuff, versus doing it really quickly, but actually there's almost no point doing it because it's clear it's not you, you know, and where that balance. So that, yeah, it's more of an observation necessarily than a question. Be interested in your thoughts, I guess, on that balance, how you're seeing people you're working with, how they're finding that. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking at the moment around some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Can I add to Andy's comment there? Because I'm from a commercial director, sales director point of view, so I like what you've said. It's that fine line between authenticity, but then it's also when you go after your strategic accounts or, you know, the stakeholders you really want to engage with, it tends to be that you need to articulate really from your own standpoint as a human, rather than being generic from an AI agent. So where I see the AI agents being very helpful, let's just say for prospecting and communicating out with your stakeholders, is the mass market and the more sort of generic, you know, where it's a numbers game now and you're just trying to get some interest out of that. But on the other side, there's the more human, authentic, and where you really add value, and that needs to be done from a kind of a human perspective. So I guess what I'm saying, it's important not to sort of conflate both of those, the two different functions. So I'm sort of half trying to answer this for you, Grant.
No, it's a good point. Yeah.
I see it that AI agents have a place to play, but it's mass market, it's a numbers game, and it's incredibly clever at reproducing your own personality, styling, and that will help you get further, quicker, faster. But at the end of the day, it's not going to answer your query, your worries on authenticity and all the rest of it. You're going to have to input a lot to it to make it similar to you. But then on the other side, don't use AI when you're going strategically out for really serious conversations, because that's where the human interaction, you can sell a non-human interaction a mile away. So don't do it with your really important stakeholders. Anyway, sorry, Grant.
Actually, can I chip in on that, Grant?
Sure.
By the way, I'm Paul. I'm actually a marketing person who's like using AI with my clients. I'm a fractional marketing officer. And I think for me, the points are both really valid, but for me, it's about remembering that it's just a tool, right? So a very, very clever tool. And so you need to be clear on what you're using the tool for. And the direct response kind of what you guys are saying is the rules are for you to set, right? If you've got a category of client or a relationship where you absolutely want to maintain that as being 100% human, then that's about creating a framework for where you deploy RevGeni and or other things, or how you deploy RevGeni and or other tools. An example I give in real life is that I think the way I see the AI is it's either helping you access something you couldn't get to before because you never had the time. So the classic sort of long tail, or to your point, volume example, JP, or it's freeing up more time with what you would have been doing to do it better. And if I look at my world, just very simple example, but I post 3-4 times a week on LinkedIn, right? And the reason I'm able to do that is because I draft sort of 75%, 80% of the post. I bang it into my large language model. I get it to create imagery or find citations. Now, if I wasn't doing that, I would probably only have the capacity to maybe post once a week, right? Now, whether I should be posting 4 times a week is a whole different debate, right? Whether it's doing anything for me is a different question. But that's a good use case for me, because it's like it's unlocking a door I didn't previously had. So if your view is you shouldn't necessarily change anything in your strategy, but if there's a segment you couldn't get to before because scale was a problem, then that for me is where AI is the way into it. But it doesn't abdicate the responsibility for us to be really clear on what to plan
which tools should I be deploying to do it? And in the same way as you might still be deploying direct mail if that's the right tool for you in certain markets, can you deploy direct mail? Don't migrate it all to outbound via an agentic AI. However, if there's 1,000 people that you never got the time to get to, then that's a great use case. So, you know, are you getting something you can get to, or are you doing something better or quicker that you used to do worse or slower? Those are my kind of like rules, in my view. That I obviously am hypocritical because I don't always stick to them, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Let me add some more to that again, because there's a report that's come out, and I'm looking at it here. It's the impact of AI on sales, right? So the report is back. There's 270 plus senior salespeople being questioned on what the impact of AI is, and there was only 35. No, okay, this back. It's the beginning of 2025, right? So we've got it's a year-old data. But only 35% of organizations surveyed were currently using specific AI tools. Can you believe it? And amongst 65% of those firms not using AI tools, over 70% were actively planning to do so in the coming year. So the real worry is that there's just a cost element to it. So it hasn't really been embraced in the sales and marketing arena as much as we might expect. So this conversation we're having now is quite interesting, isn't it, that we're feeling it out?
I think though the challenge with AI as well though, right, is that everybody wants to write about it, because similarly, you know, people are already using HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever, right? So they're already bulk tools, right, that aren't the same as AI, or that are starting to incorporate AI into it. So you get dragged into this, how many people are using AI, are they using it? And actually, if you go down to how many people are using smart automated tools, right, to some degree, you know, so I think in sales and marketing, part of the reason why you might not see the adoption shift so quickly is because if I'm already doing a good job in Salesforce, or I've already got my HubSpot set up correctly, or indeed if I'm not even utilizing 20% of the functionality in HubSpot because it's too complicated, I've never understood how to get there, you're not necessarily going to embrace a new tool that makes things more complicated more quickly.
Good point.
So it's all about context, right? But it's a tool, you know, greatest respect to Julian and Grant, what they've built, it's just clever maths and code, right? The utility of it and the ability for it to have some license as an agent is something that should be explored. But if it's not the right tool for you, don't use it. You know what I mean? Or if it's not the right tool for part of your audience, don't use it. Where it is, I'm sure it's probably a much more cost-effective way than hiring 15 SDRs in Bangalore or whatever it is you might have done in the past, right? So, you know, there's risk that comes with all of it. If your first outreach if you've got a segment of people that it's a bonus if any of them respond rather than that they're your key contacts, why wouldn't you at least get something into their inbox, right? And the same way that you might have been concerned about, let's call him Fred in Sweden, not to, you know, I'm not sure Fred's going to give the best account of what my company does in the first call, but I'd rather that someone had at least outreached. What have you got to lose? And actually you've got a load to gain, because from what I know about this tool is you can, you know, upload your brand guidelines, control the quality of the outreach, all that kind of stuff. So, but comes back to, I know I'm banging the same drum, but you got to have a plan first and then choose the tools. Your tools aren't going to create the plan for you.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I mean, one of the things we think about quite a bit is point of view. You know, I think very successful marketers, salespeople have got a very clear point of view on what they do, on their market, on how it works, what's important, etc. And that kind of sets them apart. And I think right now it would be fantastic for an agent to be able to understand your personal point of view, Andy. But we're not there. And that's really, I think, that would be nirvana in a way, because then it's really thinking like you do. You know, in reality, our customers right now are using, let's say, Maya on the content side to plan their month ahead, and using stuff like Paul mentioned in terms of better context, like, you know, the content strategy and ICP and tone of voice and all of that stuff. And good quality images, they're happy with what they're getting, but it only takes you so far in terms of, you know.
Yeah, there's an organization out there, Grant, I mentioned this to you at some point, where they take your LinkedIn profile, they optimize it and do all the standard stuff you expect. Then they go after your ICP you know, under your guidance, and then they connect you into the stakeholders, and then they're producing communications as if they are from you, until they sort of get some sort of interest, and then I think you might, yeah, and you know, an extra module for the posting and all the rest of it. So now suddenly your LinkedIn profile is behaving like you and doing active outreach, and fantastic, you know, to a point. And that's where you can go into your inbox and you get someone doing a thumbs up, or you check your posts and see the impressions and who's giving you reactions there. And you pull from that, and then you take that and you continue a journey, and you might hit them with an email as well, and then try and draw them into your objective of having a face-to-face meeting. So it works well when it's done, when you're very clear. And I think this is what Julian and Grant was saying as part of their presentation, is when you know exactly what you want it to do, and you're clear on that, and you give it, you know, the journey, an end game, and the objective, and it'll do all that. And that's a total time saver for you. And it will learn, because for each interaction it gets, you start feeding it with your battle card, which is basically objection handling, you know, and then it goes, oh, I didn't do so good on, you know, dealing with that objection. Let's, you know, do it better next time and be softer and more elegant, and maybe do 3 sequences instead of trying to close it on the one, and all that. So I do see it's got huge value, but it's fuzzy at the moment, and it can only be less fuzzy if you are very clear on what you want.
Yeah, and I think the clarity comes from doing stuff. You know, there's so much stuff you can read. You know, you can confuse the hell out of yourself. You can spend 24 hours a day reading about it, and you know, find the right people to read about, and maybe follow the right kind of people where you feel you are learning. But I think there's no substitute. And Aidan, I think you've kind of, you know, you built a couple of custom GPTs. You know, there's no substitute for just trying something at a low cost within your kind of constraints that you face yourself. And that will take you forward, and you will learn something, even if it wasn't, you know, the success or you didn't get the results that you wanted. And then you take it from there. And it's about building your personal skills and understanding, you know, because that then helps you to understand better what people are saying, and to kind of filter that for, you know, its relevance to you.
Aidan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of almost continue from that, Grant. So I did exactly that. And then to Andy's thing, I built a social media bot out of Lovable. I then went and I wanted to get slightly more complex, and I started playing with N8N. It was way too much for me, and I didn't have the time, but it's just try these things. I mean, what you were talking about, I called my social media bot. It had RSS feeds in it. It had all of these things. It had the AI to create the articles. It had all of these things. Lovable to me was the easiest way to create that sort of type of thing. But if I didn't play or try, I wouldn't have a clue that these things are possible. And I think to your exact point, Grant, you get a bit of a better understanding what people are saying once you've tried, whether you've built something or not. I mean, I didn't finish the AI, the social media bot, but I've got a way better understanding now of how these things fit together, and even just they work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the part of the theme there is, JP, you mentioned fuzziness. So we're all adjusting, learning, trying to get the best of these. And I think that we very much encourage that. It's one of the reasons we want to do the webinar, actually, is to have these discussions. There's also, I think, a lot of onus on the technology providers to do a better job of bringing AI to us in the most useful way. So, you know, one thing there, I wondered what the group feel about this, because I just don't know. But if you could imagine that the AI agents are getting better, you know, and perhaps we're not quite seeing that yet, but it's likely coming, then you could imagine the AI entering your business less like a piece of technology that you need to implement, and more like a digital colleague. And I think you'll see that in the pricing models of a lot of AI now, is that they're based on usage. So effectively transactions or credits, or whatever you want to call them, value points, we like to think of them. And so therefore it's a bit like digital labor is what you're paying for, a bit like bringing a temp in. And I think Paul, you said it's like they're kind of it's going to be as good as how well you can delegate your messaging to that person, who, if they were in Finland or India or wherever they were, then it's a bit like that when you bring an AI agent in, and it's how good the vendor can pick up what you tell them and convey your message. I don't know what people think about AI agents in that way. Does that seem like even realistic?
Yeah, you guys are, I think, nailing it, because the comprehension for a buyer, they need to understand that if they're buying an AI agent, that doesn't make any sense. What makes a lot more sense is a digital colleague, because it's now a HR digital colleague, or it's a prospecting digital colleague. And you go, because now I can imagine I could get meetings booked by this digital colleague. Now I can get to the outcome and I don't have this fuzzy thing in the way. So from a marketing and comm standpoint, and it's nice to see Paul nodding his head because he's CMO, so he would understand communications better than any of us. It's the simplicity of having a digital employee that's very carefully demarked in terms of what it can produce for you. And then you go, I know what I'm getting. And then you'll buy that because it's very easy to comprehend.
The way I think about it, JP, actually, is I quite often use AI to stand for an intern. So, and it's the same thing. So, and I think one of the things the guys are doing that's smart is anthropomorphizing the agents. So, if Maya was an intern, right? I'm picking the wrong one, but she was. And let's say that intern gives you 100 email drafts every morning at 8:30 that you can have a quick scan through and then press send on.
Yeah.
99 of. Wow, that'd be a great world to live in. And if Maya was only costing me equivalently 50 quid for that task, it's a no-brainer. We'd all be doing it with interns tomorrow, right? But also, if I didn't tell Maya what I didn't like about the one I didn't send, then Maya's never going to get any better.
Yeah.
So I think absolutely that mindset of digital colleague, and coming back, our plan is, Maya, that you are going to get through this audience I can't get through. But the transformational impact of, I think it almost is like being briefed like a cabinet minister. So the difference between I've got 1,000 emails I've got to draft and send, versus, Maya's already drafted 1,000 emails. All I've got to do is review them. Instantly, that's half an hour versus 3 days, or procrastination, you never do it.
Then as you get to trust her, you can go to the 80-20 rule. They're only just checking things every now and again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that was.
It's been really valuable, guys. Sorry, I've got to jump. Grant, I'll catch up with you later. But thank you very much.
Thanks for attending.
Cheers.